What's up, YouTube? We're at the track. Finally, the video that a lot of you guys have been asking for is going to happen. We're going to do a track day video. So right now, we just got everything set up, and as you can tell, the track's hot, it's loud, so we're going to go get tacked in, and then when we come back, we're going to do a spool up, make sure that everything's good for today's conditions, and then we'll talk about that, and then we'll get ready to make our first pass. So stick around. Okay, so we're back from tech. Everything went good there. Nice and simple. When you have an NHRA membership, they pretty much just give you the green light. So I guess that's the one perk of spending the $220 every 2 years it costs to have that thing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a spool up. And the reason that we're going to do a spool up before we make any of the runs is to make sure that it spools in a timely manner in this particular environment. It's not too bad. It's about 85 degrees. Humidity is somewhere around 50% last time I checked. So should spool up fine. I haven't touched anything with the spool up. We just heated the bottle up, so we should be good to go. We're gonna go do that, and then we will report back. So we do the first spool up, and it just doesn't make the boost that I needed it to make. For whatever reason, it just didn't make it, which is really strange because I hadn't changed anything from UCC, except this is a different transmission because I went through kind of different. It's in a different case, and it's also a different valve body. I put my spare valve body back in, so it's the same converter. Everything else is the same, but anytime you make transmission changes, you need to be sure that you don't have anything that has changed, and apparently something here has slightly changed. According to my notes here, the first spool up we did, it peaked at 16 pounds of boost, and it fell off to about 13.8 on the limiter, which is really, really weird, because that same setup was making 23 pounds of boost and falling off to about like 21.5, 22 at UCC. It was 930 psi of nitrous pressure. I had both spool jets off once they got up to 14 pounds of boost, I believe. And then the dump valve was on. So wanted to make a change to try to get more boost on the limiter. I was kind of happy that the boost was low because I thought, oh, now I can turn my nitrous on. Before, for whatever reason, I could not leave the spool jets on. It would make too much boost. It'd make 28, 30 pounds of boost. So I was like, okay, cool. This next one, I'll just turn the, I'll leave the first spool jet, the 028 jet, I'll leave that on, and then we'll see what that makes on the limiter. So you probably can't tell there because it looks exactly like the last spool up we just did, and that's because it basically was. If anything, it made less boost. It peaked at 15 psi and then it fell off to 13.9. So almost the same, a little bit less peak. I overlaid the logs, EGT looked the same, everything looked the same, so it was kind of puzzling as to why I was able to leave that spool jet on and it didn't make hardly any change, if not any beneficial change to the spool. And so at this point I'm thinking that, okay, well, it needs more fuel, you know, we're leaning it out, so I think that if I just turn the other nitrous spool jet, if I just leave it on, I think it's just going to continue to lean it out. I don't think it's going to make any more boost. I think it's just going to get leaner. So for my next spool up, I turned the dump valve off at 13 psi because I could make two changes in my mind. I could add fuel, which means I could play with my staging limiter and, you know, give it just a little bit more pump travel, or I could add load. And I've been wanting to turn the dump valve off before I leave the starting line anyways to make 100% sure that the converter's filled back up. So I decided to try that first. spool up there, virtually no change again. So now I'm kind of puzzled because I thought for sure that the load would at least increase it 1 or 2 psi of boost, and it really didn't. According to my notes, it did the same exact thing as the second spool, and the nitrous pressure was 930 on this one. The one before was 940. So nitrous isn't the problem. It's not, the bottle's not out or anything crazy. It just didn't make any more boost. So at this point, I'm a little frustrated because we've just made 3 spool ups, and like this stuff should be figured out before we come to the track. So we need to make one more before we go up there. I need it to make a little bit more boost. It's no sense in going to the starting line if you know that you're not going to leave on enough boost. If it's going to drive into power, it's going to spin, it's going to upset the tire, you're going to abort the run. No reason I'm going up there. So cool it down, and I decided to do a 4th spool up, which we didn't get a video of. But on this one, I actually gave it more fuel, so I shortened up my stage in limiter. I did 2 turns on it. Mine has got that adjuster rod, so I could do, you know, 2 turns. So did that, and I didn't put the card back in it, of course, to log it, but it made 20 psi of boost, and it fell off to like 18 from what I could see on my dash. And so I said, all right, good, we're in business. So we get the truck cooled down, get the air to water ice down, get it ready to make a pass. It's a pretty hot day. When we started the day, it was in the mid 80s, mid to low 80s, and the humidity is really high. So it takes a long time to get everything cooled down. So by the time you do 4 spool ups, you know, we got there at 5. We were set up, you know, ready by 6. I mean, it was 8 o'clock before we were able to make a first pass, just because of doing 4 spool ups and getting it cooled down in between. So we go up there to make the first run, and it's not that great of a run. So your body has an internal G meter, and it's pretty crazy, like what all that can tell you. The more intimate you get with your vehicle, and the more familiar you get with it, and the more passes you make with it, the more you will feel and notice things in it, to where you'll almost immediately know what happened. It's kind of crazy that your brain can slow everything down and process it and feed, you know, give you data back like that. But I went up there and I let go of the button, and immediately I felt like it just like spun the tire just a little bit. And in my mind, it spun the tire, and I noticed that it took the wheel to the right. So I pulled it back left a little bit. And then when I pulled it back left, usually if I have to do much wheel input, I'll usually abort the run. I'm really bad about pedaling. It's like in my being to pedal. I just can't get it out of me. And it went left, and I stuck it once. I just whopped it, and you can hear in the video where it's like whop, and the RPM change, and it pulled back straight, and it was straight. So I just stayed in it, let it make the 1-2 shift, just to see where it was going to make the 1-2 shift, and then dumped out of it, rolled back around to the pits. So watched the video, pulled the data. Sure enough, it spun the tire initially. As soon as it cracked the tire, it spun. You can watch the Hoosier outrun the speed in which the chassis is setting. You know, you can watch the chassis set, and the Hoosier on the tire goes whoop. And so, and then on the graph on the data log, you can see it's got, you know, a little peak. And anytime it has a peak, you can overlay G meter, And it's kind of hard to see on the initial crack because the G meter just starts moving, so usually your G will still be climbing. But anytime you have a high in your wheel speed, that's spin, and then you can see where it was like kind of spinning a little bit on its way up, and you could see where I jacked it when I pedaled it, and it kind of, you know, made it spin a little bit when it came back in. So it was a really ugly pass, looked like typical all-wheel drive runs, but surprisingly it did go a 142 60 foot, which I was kind of shocked about because it felt pretty terrible in the truck. And that was with 15 psi tire pressure all the way around. That was leaving the starting line at 16.5 pounds of boost, which is a little bit less than what I was initially wanting. But when I looked at the boost graph, before, like when I was running this thing fuel only, at 23 pounds of boost, when I'd let off the trans brake, boost would actually fall off to like 22.5, and it would hang out for about a quarter second before it ramped back in. And you could see in the videos, like, just that big black plume of smoke would come out when I'd let off the brake, and it was basically just over fueling the engine, and there wasn't enough air in it to get through it, so it was like brrrr, and it wasn't enough necessarily to upset the chassis, but it wasn't going to be fast that way. So, you know, when we went 135 60 foot, that's what it was doing. So I was really excited to see the boost on this one was 16.5. And then as soon as I was off the brake and the G meter started to move, it was 16.6, 16.7, 16.8, and then it just ramped real nice. So it was really snappy off the brake. Now, some of that could be because it spun the tire initially. It allowed it to be real snappy on boost. So when we get that tire dead hooked, it might need more boost on the starting line or more nitrous because it might, you know, bog it through that little spot, but we'll have to see. So the trans temp was 144 degrees on that one. Bottle pressure was 944. That's all perfectly fine. A little hotter trans temp than what I would have wanted, but we had just done 4 spool ups on a 80 degree, extremely humid day, so, you know, as to be expected, it to be a little warmer. Keep in mind that trans temp is going to play a big deal on load on the converter. How much boost that it's going to make is going to vary on trans temp. That's why I try to always shoot for like 130 to 135 on the starting line, because that way I have a good consistent starting. If you try to shoot for anything lower than that, it's just not going to happen on days like this. Like, it's just going to get too hot. So I like to set them up somewhere in that 130, 135 degree. In this case, it was a little bit warmer than I wanted, but it didn't seem to have an extreme effect. And then made the 1-2 shift at 5,025 RPM, which is perfect. Really happy about that. And that was a 60 jet off the trans brake and leaving that 028 spool jet on. EGT looked the best it's ever looked. It didn't get higher than 1662, I believe it was. Anything in the 16 to 1800 range I'm good with. Anything less than 1600, I want to get it a little hotter because you're losing energy. But anything at 1600 I'm golden with. Like, I would be happy to run that out the rest of the pass like that. Noticed in the video that it was definitely less smoky, but still have a long way to go from getting it all the way lean. So decide for this next pass, all we're going to change is tire pressure. I was looking over the videos, looking over the data, and looking at how, so like there's a little bit of sticker left on the tire from where there were new tires, and there's a little bit of sticker on the outer part of the tread. So if this is your tread, this part of it out here, there was some sticker left, and then in the center it was nice and, you know, fresh and clean. And so and you could kind of see the lines in the tire the way that it was. And between the video and what that tells me is that it had too much air pressure, and it was too bubbly. And so it wasn't, you know, it wasn't setting the tire the way it needed to. If it didn't have enough air pressure, it would fold the tire in the center, and it would have burnt that sticker off on the edge, outer edge, because when it folds in the center, it's just running on the outer parts of the tire of the tread. So decided to talk to JP, and I was going to drop it down to 14. He said go 13.5. So we went 13.5 all the way around. As the only change we made. Went back up to make the next run, which was going to be our last run because they had an oil down in between. It was getting close to closing time. So it's pretty much this was going to be our last one for the night. So I go up there and take the tree. And I've got to say, I'm very pleased with the staging procedure that this thing is doing for me. Being able to spool it up on the foot brake and creep it in and set the trans brake is just so nice, not having to do the whole bump procedure. There's nothing wrong with the whole bump procedure, but you're riding the brake anyways to keep the truck from rocking too much. And so it's like you're spooled up, you're bumping in, your foot's on the brake, and then once you get in, you got to take your foot off the brake anyways. So to me, I just really like staging like a man. So the other thing is like when you can stage consistently and it's going to stage every time, your confidence as a driver becomes so much better, and you stop worrying about things like that, and it makes you more aware. It just overall improves your program. I tell people that the 3 things that will absolutely make you want to quit racing is battery problems, not being able to spool up, and not being able to stage consistently. If you get those 3 things figured out to where you don't have to worry about those, they're not even in your mind, you will do so much better. So I spool up, and it's it's getting a little late. It's like 77 degrees, like 63% humidity. So water grains, I'm sure, were up. I don't know enough about water grains to talk about them, but it was humid. And this thing had fire out the pipe. It was ready to go. I was ready to let go of the button, and then all of a sudden it went bah! Like, it was the weirdest thing. It was up on boost, it was ready to rock and roll, and it just died. But it didn't die. It was idling. As soon as it did it, I let out, and it was idling fine. And I initially thought, like, okay, this is impossible, but it felt like the converter locked. But I don't have a lockup converter in this, so it's not possible. But that's exactly, it felt like if you would have flipped the lockup switch, that's exactly what it felt like. So, did the drive of shame on down the track, brought it back, drove down fine, drove back fine. Man, the whole way I'm like, what the heck was that? So I get back, and we're kind of looking over at the log. We don't really see anything. And my buddy Newman, he noticed that right before that run, I went to start the truck, and I had the fuel shut off pulled out. And I hurried up and quick pushed it back in because I still have a mechanical cable on it. And I didn't push it in all the way, so the fuel shut off wasn't all the way closed. It was about halfway. And when that thing got up on boost and the harmonics of that engine started to make that nice little vibration that it does, it just vibrated that cable closed enough to where it just snuffed it out. Basically, it was like being spooled up and pulling the fuel cable killed. So that really sucks. More stupid problems that are getting you. But that's the point of testing. Still working out those gremlins. Should have had a spring on it to make sure that doesn't happen. So it's getting a spring on it now to make sure. So our night was pretty much done there. I know it seems like this was not a successful outing, but anytime you go out and you learn something, it is successful. I can tell you that little blip on that 140 260 foot that I did, that little pedal job, it was 1/10 of a second of a pedal, and by looking at the RPM, the way it fell off and the way it came back up, I could tell you that probably hurt me 3 or 4 numbers just right there. So that 60 foot probably would have been 139, 138, and I was having to drive it, and anytime you're not going straight, you're eating up distance. So in my mind, that same deal where I wouldn't have had to drive it and wouldn't have to blip the throttle, that probably would have been 136, 135, probably would have been right back where we were on the 60 foot, even with that little blip of wheel speed at the beginning. But the good part about that is that that's with all the fuel cut back in the pump. That's with the plate all the way back. And it only made 63 pounds of boost, which makes me really happy. Usually you want to make more boost, but I want to make less so I can spray it more. So before it was making 82 pounds of boost, so about 19 pounds of boost out of it. So now I'm confident that I can, you know, get after it more with the nitrous, and I really think that this thing's going to go high 120, 60 foots when we get it, everything working correctly. So we're not done. That was Friday night. Today is Saturday, and we are going to go to our local track, Thornhill, where basically I grew up at. That's where my dad raced his whole life. That's kind of the track that got me into all this. So we're going to go there tonight, and we're going to work on more 60-foot testing. Hopefully make 3, maybe 4 runs. I'd be cool with 3. And see where we can go with this thing. So stick around, and we'll catch you on the next test video coming up real soon.